Hello, it's Gareth here. Welcome along to Somewhere on Earth. We're in our studio here in London, and we also do have another voice that you're about to hear from Sao Paulo in Brazil. You might even be able to guess who it is. Here we go. Yes, joining me today, of course, is Angelica Mauri over there in Sao Paulo. How's it going over there, Angelica? Have you recovered from your adventures in the Amazon?
Yeah, just about, Gareth. I got dengue fever, you know.
No.
Yeah,
But
it took me a while to recover, but
word.
I
nasty.
managed in the end.
Gosh. Oh, that's quite often you just come on and you'll say something in quite a kind of, conversational, underhand kind of way that'll be a bit shocking or astounding, and that is one of those things. Gosh, you've had dengue. That's how awful for you. Anyway, I'm sorry to hear you had that, and I'll still treat you gently in this edition. I think it's probably about
Thank
right.
you, Gareth. You're such a gentleman. I really appreciate
all chivalry.
it.
There we are. All right, let's get on with the show. And coming up in this edition, this week sees the second anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Now, one of the many places to look for resilience in this country that's taken and is taken such a pounding is, of course, in the world of technology. Before the conflict, Ukraine was already well known for having a thriving tech sector. But since 2022, despite the destruction, despite many people having left, and despite men being called up to fight, there is still a thriving tech scene in that country. At least we're about to find out how thriving it still is. We're going to assess that scene, and also we're going to hear about the new university in Ukraine with a kind of startup mindset, and it's been taking shape since 2022. It's all right here on the Somewhere on Earth podcast. Well, literally a week before that full-scale invasion, a new university had just established. So what a time to start such a venture. This is the SET University, where SET stands for Science, Entrepreneurship, Technology. The tagline is reinventing higher education in Ukraine to empower future tech innovators. To put it mildly, SET University has certainly had to pivot given the situation. In fact, degree programs have swung towards cybersecurity and defense tech, not surprisingly. More now from the university's president, Iryna Volnytska.
For us, technology is our only option because if you work in tech, you can work remotely, you can work in the bomb shelters like anytime you want. And we managed to work with the Starlinks, with generators, etc. And if you work in traditional industry, conventional industry, you need like spaces, devices, a lot of things. And a huge number of traditional industries were physically ruined, so they can't do it in a digital way. Also, we have a lot of clients outside of Ukraine, and when the war started, I know that a lot of outsourcing companies, they contacted all their clients and asking for their contracts from the Russian outsourcing companies. That is exactly what helped them for the first year, because we still, there were a lot of people, a lot of companies who wanted to help Ukraine, even to earn money in such a way. So they provided Ukrainians with the contracts. When the war started, we launched the courses for people who want to switch from traditional industry to tech industry. And in 2 weeks, we received 5,000 applications. And after us, the Ministry of Digital Transformation, they also launched the course for the first in their history, not only Ukrainian history, but they had more female applicants than male, because really people just need a new job. And the only job that you can find in Ukraine, it's only in tech, because tech is still keep growing.
Which brings us to the SET University then. So tell us about the university. What is the SET University?
I registered the legal entity only 1 week before the war. So our students, they create a startup instead of writing thesis. But the war started, and in the best traditions of startups, we pivoted a couple of times. For us, actually, it was a question of survival. Right now, we want to respond to the most critical issues that are happening in Ukraine. And as a university, we need to teach. So when the war started, we canceled our master degree or degrees, all our plans, and we started to provide people in Ukraine with short-term courses because we understood that it's not only the physical war, but it's also a digital war. It is a war of technology. And Ukraine will be on the front line of cybersecurity developments, defense tech for many years. So we started the short courses for cybersecurity. We received 5,000 applications. So we taught just the ordinary people from traditional industries how to join tech. And then we also partnered with different organizations, to teach people some jobs for beginners in technology. Right now, actually, we came back to our initial plan. We launched a master's degree. Our mission was about innovations, about startups, etc. But what we saw with our students that they want to create defense tech startups. The majority of them, they want to contribute to the defense tech. From investments perspectives, that all investors that are coming to Ukraine, they are really very interested in defense tech.
But completely understandable at a time like this. And it's a fascinating model because you're partly a startup and at the same time you're an institution of higher education, you're recruiting undergraduates and you just said master's students there. So tell me about that unique vision then to create a university based on a startup culture.
It was from the beginning, my team and me, we came from business, so we are not from academia. And maybe sometimes it's a problem, sometimes it's good, but we try to combine all our business approaches that we learned from business environment, from startups. That's why we know how business works, how startup works. The technology is moving faster than you can write a book, for example, for the students. That's why we decided that we also need to move fast in education. And right now in Ukraine, you don't have a choice. You can't plan anything. I mean, because you don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. That's why we try to work in the startup mode, gathering all best practices from all over the world. We have partnerships with different universities from all over the world because everyone wants to help us, to teach us, to support us. But in terms of education, right now it is super hard to plan something on a long-term perspective. Personally, me and my team, we believe that education is our future because for tech sector growth, we need educated talents. And right now we experience the biggest brain drain in the history of Ukraine.
And of course, it must be very challenging to think into the long term, given the predicament in which Ukraine finds itself. And I know that you're planning to launch undergraduate programs in the next year, maybe the next year or two. But how will students sign up for an undergraduate program if they're not entirely sure that there's going to be a university there at the end of it to award them a degree?
Our first bachelor degree will be next year, and it will be very, very, very unusual bachelor degree because what we saw from the previous year that there are no children in Ukraine. 6 million of refugees, majority of them, it's women who left with children. All these women, they reported that they do not plan to come back to Ukraine with their children. What we want to do at SET University, we want to choose the countries with the biggest number of Ukrainian refugees all over the world, like in Poland, in England, and in Berlin and Silicon Valley. And for the first semester, we will teach, for example, in Poland. For the second semester, we will teach in Berlin. For the third semester, we will teach in England, then in Silicon Valley, etc. And for the last semester, we want to bring all these children back to Kiev and teach them in Kiev and to show them that there are opportunities in Ukraine. So there are a lot of things that you can do in Ukraine. We will help them to attract investments for their startups, for their diploma work. And we hope that in this case, they will see that there are really plenty of opportunities in Ukraine and they will stay and help us to rebuild the country. And all this rotation, we will teach in the big tech offices. So like Facebook, like Google, they are ready to provide their offices for our students, so we can teach our students in their offices. And like we believe that it also will help us to bring all this international expertise to Ukraine and to reduce this skills gap between business and academia. And like at the end, we will bring everyone back home.
That is Iryna Volnytska, and there's more from her, by the way, in the subscription, the podcast extra version. So, Angelica, you've actually been speaking, haven't you, recently to Ukrainian tech founders. You've been finding out how they've been dealing with, and in some cases thriving within this situation. So what have you found out on your journalistic travels?
I recently wrote a piece about how Ukrainian tech entrepreneurs are operating in this war scenario. And it was a bit of a look back, considering the 2 years since the full-scale invasion began. I was actually interested in hearing what were the motivations of these founders. Regardless of their decisions to stay or to leave. I wanted to hear both sides of the story without making it look like there's a right or wrong choice in this case. The point is that these are all tough decisions, right? And I wanted to hear how they've been operating on a daily basis, their dramas and everything, how they had to adapt. And it was really fascinating to hear them. It is a real story of nothing more than pure resilience, really, to navigate through total uncertainty and chaos.
And of course, business is hard at the best of times, let alone these, which are arguably the worst of times. So did you encounter people who had started companies since the war started, since this full-scale invasion started?
Yeah. What Iryna was referring to is quite real from what I've heard. Tech sometimes is the only option. And particularly to start a company is the only option. I spoke to someone who, interestingly, was selling Russian software to Ukrainian companies. And he immediately ended the relationship with this company as soon as the war began, for obvious reasons. But then he started to consider his options and started a company. Finding a job was hard, so starting his own company became the best option. And it is real. Like they have to operate in really precarious situations with unstable mobile connectivity, sometimes no power. So they're having to adapt to all of these circumstances.
Yeah, that seems to be a theme that's coming up time and again when we talk about innovation in Ukraine. It's just adaptability. These businesses have no choice. What about those who have left? Did you get a sense of people leaving Ukraine or even keeping their business where it is in the country, but leaving, if they're able to anyway, leaving the country themselves?
Yeah, some people choose to do so. Chose to do that for reasons including personal safety, but also to avoid being drafted into the army in the case of men, but also to ensure they were providing a stable service to their customers, because oftentimes we're talking about global businesses. And it's quite tough because many of these founders had to sort of build the plane as they were flying it, meaning globalize their workforce. Many of these companies were entirely Ukrainian and adapt their infrastructure, as we were discussing just now, also shift their legal headquarters and deal with all sorts of aspects to continue to attract funding, because investors were not really willing to take risks, especially at the beginning. A lot of adaptation taking place. And also, it's particularly difficult to be a founder based outside Ukraine when a lot of your staff is still in the country. So you had companies where they fully embraced the either hybrid or remote models, but you had scenarios where half of companies' workforce was still based in Ukraine and half decided to leave. So they really had to change management mindsets and working models to adapt to the situation.
Yeah, sure. And so finally and briefly on this section then, what about, are people being encouraged to get back home? Are you getting a sense that maybe those who left are really keen on going back, or will they now stay put and maybe indefinitely outside Ukraine?
Some of the people, again, there's no right or wrong answer on this. And a lot of people are just taking each day as it comes. And some people moved elsewhere and they rebuilt their lives, and they have new realities right now. But most of the people I've been speaking to, the Ukrainians I've been in touch with over the last few months, they all want to, the ones that are based outside Ukraine at the moment, they want to return to their country because they really believe that tech will be key to rebuilding Ukraine after the war ends.
Yeah, that's encouraging to hear. Angelica, thanks very much. All right, now, someone else who's been taking an interest in the state of innovation in Ukraine is Bhaskar Chakravorti. He's Dean of Global Business at Tufts University in the United States. And Bhaskar is also chair of a research initiative called Digital Planet. Great name. And that explores the impact of digital innovations around the world. Since 2022, he's been following several Ukrainian founders and entrepreneurs and says that Ukraine's tech infrastructure that had been prepared since the annexing of Crimea in 2014 has been key to the tech sector's growth today.
The infrastructure was a critical part of the story. For one, the Ukrainian industry and the government had already plans in place for building in redundancy in the infrastructure. So this goes back to the 2014 invasion of Crimea, where they anticipated, Russian invasions, and they anticipated that one of the first things that Russia would do was take down the internet. So most of the companies we spoke with actually had 2 to 3 different ways to get on the internet if the first route went down. And for some of them, they had to use Starlink, Elon Musk's project, but most of them actually didn't even use Starlink. They had their own redundancy built in. So that infrastructure was critical. Another part of the infrastructure was critical was the fact that the Ukrainians, because of this Dia app that people had already got on their phones, it was a great way for them to connect to a number of different government assistance programs. And then that Dia app was, during the war, adapted for a variety of war-related efforts, such as there were job postings. So if you were displaced, there was a bulletin board that could say, okay, here is a remote job that you can get as a school teacher, because of course children weren't going to school. So you could teach, kids, all kinds of subjects, or you could get some other job as an IT engineer, or if a company needed, new coders and programmers, you could post on that bulletin board. And this bulletin board was essentially an outcome of a government app that had been provided. And then there was a variety of other apps, such as citizens could post videos and pictures of oncoming Russian tanks or other military movements in their area, so that that information could be collected, by the ministry, and they could, make plans accordingly. So there is both the hard infrastructure of the internet and this applications infrastructure on people's phones, which was really a spectacular orchestration of what I would call the digital public infrastructure of Ukraine that worked beautifully. And it worked for normal circumstances, and it certainly has worked in a crisis situation. And on top of all that, the government provided tax breaks for small and medium businesses, and IT businesses were a critical part of that.
I suppose we should be aware of not painting too much of a rosy picture about what's going on. Despite, it's amazing, adaptable collaboration, very adaptable workforce, resilience that seemed to be built into much of the system even before the full-scale invasion, Ukraine having highly educated people, so much going for it, and the tech sector. And yet at the same time, its economy clearly has been hammered. It's relying on the likes of the European Union and the United States Congress to argue their way into some kind of multi-billion-dollar financial aid for the country. Ukraine is in very bad trouble. It's suffering greatly, of course, from brain drain, if we want to talk about talent. So just to give a balanced picture about what you've come away thinking about Ukraine as you go through doing this research, where are we on a spectrum from, look, it's really grim, it's a basket case, all the way up to, actually, there's still a lot going for this country and its tech sector?
There is a lot going for this country. It's been 2 years of this last phase of a war, which started long before 2022. And here is this country that has essentially fought and defended itself and continues to do so with varying degrees of support from outside Ukraine. When I think about the different ways in which it mobilized this defense, the first thing that one thinks of is nothing to do with technology. It's just got to do with people. It's the human spirit, in the absence of which none of this would have happened and Ukraine would have just tumbled like a row of dominoes. But the tech industry and the tech sector really has made a difference. So if you think about that first phase of, from 2022 to 2023, the Ukrainian economy collapsed by about 30%, which is kind of what everybody was expecting. And its two major exports, agriculture and commodities, they collapsed too because the ports from which these commodities and grain would have to leave were blocked. But as long as the internet was functioning, their third largest export, which is IT services, continued to function. And it actually grew. It grew by 5% in that first year. We haven't seen the numbers for the next year. But from what I can tell, it has continued to grow. So it's a $7 billion industry, which is spectacular. It's amazing. So when I think about the role of technology in this Ukraine war, it is quite humbling to not only see this as a potential growth vector during a devastating war, which has almost never happened before in previous wars, but technology also was critical in Ukraine's defense. When I kind of go back to how this human spirit was mobilized, I would trace this back to the smartphone videos that President Zelensky had of himself standing in recognizable areas of Kiev alongside his cabinet and kind of saying, I'm here. We are, the administration is functioning. And that gave so much of a boost to everybody in the country. And that was enabled by technology. So from something as basic as that to an entire sector and industry, keeping the economy alive and growing in certain parts, I think is a really humbling and at the same time a really inspiring use of digital technologies.
Right, that was Bhaskar Chakravorti. So, Angelica, what is your assessment of the kind of state of the wider economy, or certainly in this context, the tech sector in Ukraine after what has been these 2 very, very difficult years?
Yeah, despite all of that's been going on, the entire tech ecosystem is very positive about what the future holds. Tech is Ukraine's most significant export, but you also have to consider the bigger picture. Ukraine's overall export value fell by nearly 19% last year compared to 2022. And that was the sharpest decline in the last 10 years. So things are challenging for them, but we've been discussing this for this whole episode, is how adaptable these entrepreneurs and professionals are. And what we see is a shift from services to products. So it was quite hard for companies to sell services provided out of Ukraine because customers didn't want to take the risk. So what founders have been doing is shifting really quickly, shifting their business model or diversifying to incorporate products into their unique selling proposition. So what people have been telling me is that their products will continue to grow very strongly, and their learnings over the last 2 years will mean that these will be more resilient, profitable, and stronger companies in the years to come.
All right, Angelica, thank you. That's where we'll leave it. Angelica Mari there, joining us in Sao Paulo. Let's do it again in a few weeks, Angelica.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you.
Loved it. All right. So we'll do the socials, then the credits. So you probably know the score by now, folks. The email is hello@somewhereonearth.co. On WhatsApp, we are code 44 7486 329 484. And you can search for us on various bits of the social media via Soap Tech. Remember, that's SOEP. I don't know what you get if you get soap, like as in detergent tech, but you can try it if you want and tell us what you found. Or just search for Somewhere on Earth, the Global Tech Podcast, and that should get you there as well. Audio this week has been by Stevie Arnoldi and John Cronin here at Lanson's Team Farner. The production manager is Liz Teary, the editors Anya Viktorovich, and I'm Mr. Mitchell. Thanks for listening. Bye.